Members may now approach and view the printed results for Lapu-Lapu Region 7 for the senatorial contest.
Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa for the Rapper team. I'm taking over for a little bit from Ralph, who I hope you've gotten a chance to get to know. Joining me right now is election lawyer Emil Maranon. You'll remember him, or we first met him when he was helping run the Commission on Elections with working very closely with Sixto Brillantes. So he went through the 2013 elections, a little bit of the 2013
in
preparations for the 2016, right? So you were there about 5 years.
5 years.
Also, right now, he is an external counsel with Vice President Lenny Robredo. Emil, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for inviting me.
You just came from PICC.
Yes, I did.
So what is it like there?
So
What's happening?
they just opened actually the canvassing for the senatorial and party list elections. So they started receiving votes from different provinces and cities from all over the country. And I think the first one that came through was from the province of Ifugao.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Everything looks normal to you, you know?
I mean, comparing it with a manual canvassing, for example, there's less action in an automated election canvassing.
Right.
Because basically what happens is that the data just comes in from all over the Philippines, and that's it. I mean, you wouldn't know. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you wouldn't know the numbers. There's no document that you get to compare or see. So everything is electronic now. So everything is very fast. And as a lawyer, you have nothing much to do there now.
Were you still around when they used to do the wall numbers, everything?
Well, I've seen at the level of the barangay, because barangay elections in the Philippines is still manual. But as regards national elections, I became a lawyer in 2009, and that was 2010 election was my first election, and it's already automated.
How would you compare what happened in these elections with the elections you were at on the Commission on Election side?
Okay. Well, it's much different. It's the same because it's the same system. It's automated election.
Right.
But I think to a certain extent, this election, I think we have observed more cases of vote buying, for example.
Correct.
And apart from
Is it as much as Commissioner Guanzon had told us that she was seeing as much as double what the normal numbers?
No,
right?
it's really difficult to quantify.
Okay.
Because there's no way of doing that.
Right.
But the thing is, I can speak for what I have experienced, for example. In Binyan, for example, you can see just outside of the schools, you can see a drop box where voters can actually drop their names after voting, and then they'll raffle it, and you can possibly win around 10,000 pesos after the elections. And in the voters as well, massive vote buying. You can see people lining up, openly, blatantly. I mean, there's no pretension of hiding it.
Right. Part of it is also partly because President Duterte said there isn't anything
Exactly.
wrong with it, right?
That's the
so
thing.
It's much more blatant.
It's like an informal endorsement on the part of the president. It's like an acceptance on the part of the national government that vote buying is okay, and we can do nothing about it. and that's a problem with it.
But let's go to the preparations of the Commission on Elections.
Yes.
I mean, I think the actual kind of checks of the machines was
Yes.
3 months late. And well,
Yes.
let's start with what's different. Number
Okay.
one, from 2016,
Okay.
the number of registered voters went up 14%, right?
Yeah, no, it's around almost, I think,
60,
60
62
62 million, I
million,
think.
right? 61.8. Right,
It's
right,
62
right.
million, so.
Right, so 62
Huge
million
number.
registered voters. Yeah.
So just to explain to the public, I mean, from the perspective of the COMELEC, it's in terms of logistics, it's a nightmare.
Yep.
Because can you imagine 62 million people voting simultaneously in the span of 12 hours, and that's from end to end of the Philippines, like comprising of around 7,000 islands. So it's very complicated just to make sure, for example, that all machines are delivered in all of these islands is a logistical nightmare on the part of the COMELEC.
But we've seen now, I guess working with the automated elections, I've
Yes.
seen 3 different groups
Yes.
handle the
Yes.
Commission on
Yes.
Elections. One of the COMELEC chairmen we actually took to the Supreme Court,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But in terms of this one, the other thing, the other statistic that stood out was
Yes.
the number of VCMs.
Errors.
What we used to well, not just errors, but
Malfunctions.
malfunctions,
Yes,
right?
that is correct.
That it was as many as almost
Yes.
900 plus,
Yes.
almost 1,000 machines,
Yes.
which is like exponential the number of times in
Are-
2016.
Yes. Well, the problem with that is this is something that should have been anticipated in the first place. Because we have this so-called the final testing and sealing, which is called the FTS. Under the law, all machines that will be used on election day will have to be tested at least a week before the elections.
Correct.
And at that time, there were already a lot of complaints regarding SD cards.
Right.
They knew and they should have anticipated that there will be problems with the SD cards. And then apart from that...
Sorry, just in context, again, in the 2013 elections, we had SD card
Yes.
problems as well, right?
No, but not as massive
Not
as
as
this.
massive as this. But I remembered, like, in the middle of the night, the transmission slowed around 2 a.m. And it slowed only because they had to replace the SD
Yes,
cards.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, but this election, as early as the FTS or the final testing and sealing, there were already signs that there were lots of malfunctioning SD cards. And the moment you encounter this problem, it's a sign actually that there must be a problem with the SD cards being supplied
Themselves.
to COMELEC. Remember, there's only one supplier for all SD
Interesting.
cards.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that was the cause of it?
And it's a combination of
Right.
things. For example, the marking pen.
Right. There were lots of complaints
Yeah,
about
during
that as well.
during the start of the OFW voting, absentee voting in Hong Kong, they already noted a problem with the marking pens. In fact, COMELEC recalled over 1 million marking pens, like a few weeks before elections.
And so the the overseas absentee voters began a month earlier, so April 13th.
Yes, April 13th. That is
So
correct.
by a month before, they knew
Yes.
something was wrong with the marking
Yes,
pens.
yes, because it was blotting. So the moment you mark
Yes,
an
yes.
oval, it actually seeps through the other side.
Right, and the other side is the party list.
Yes, but the thing is, in fairness to COMELEC, they would position the ovals on 2 different places. So even if it blots, it will not hit the oval on the other side.
But if it is the party list, then it looks like you have 2
Exactly.
votes, you overvote.
Well, not
No.
necessarily, because the machine would only read those shades within the oval. Outside of it, it doesn't care.
Okay, got it. So you're saying that should have been anticipated
Yes.
and contingency plans
Yes.
should have been.
Well, I mean, if you look at the problem actually started with how the automated election system is procured.
Right.
Because before, for example, in 2010 elections, you have this case where you bid the whole automated system, which means that one supplier has to bid for everything, like the paper, the ballot paper, the marking pens, the SD cards. So you're talking to only one supplier.
Yes.
And in terms of accountability, it's easier as well, because the moment something happens, then you know who
to go to.
who to. I mean, it's Smartmatic, for example, in the case of 2010
yes,
elections.
yes.
But in the 2019 elections, for example, everything has been unbundled, which means you end up with like 5, 6 suppliers.
It's much more of a nightmare to manage.
Yes, a
isn't it?
different supplier for the machine, for
Yeah.
the pen, the machine, the SD cards, and everything. So now the problem is the moment something happens here, for example, with the SD cards, the SD card supplier will always say that, oh, it's not us, it's the machine.
else,
Smartmatic will say,
right.
it's not us, it's the SD cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Very interesting. The other big problem that we had, so it was the VCM. Are these the same PCOS machines?
No, it's different.
Completely different ones?
It was
Okay.
first used during the 2016 elections.
Okay, right,
So this
right,
is the
correct.
second time that these machines will be used.
I remember much earlier in one of the automated elections, we had as many as 90,000 or 91,000 PCOS machines. It was that time period. Do you
I think
remember this?
it's less.
Okay.
It's way less because
Okay.
actually 2016 elections we have the most number of VCMs.
Okay, so, but it
Now
was,
it's around, I
now
think
it's
it's
like-
almost 90,000.
It's still in the
It's
80s,
85,
right?
80,
I thought that the
86,000.
number of machines went
No, it's more now.
backwards. Okay.
It's more now.
All right, and then of course the biggest thing that media and the parties and election watchers actually noticed was the transparency server that
Yes.
wasn't transparent.
Yes, yes.
My first thought there was Commissioner Lim. You know how
Yes.
he truly. This
Yes.
is the man who really was the IT guy for many,
Yes.
many years of
I'm a
the
fan of this
Commission
guy,
of
so.
Elections. Me too. He's the silent worker behind
Yes.
the scenes. Hello, Commissioner Lim, if you're watching. What happened here, from what you can see?
Well, apparently, they're saying that all the VCMs have actually transmitted, around 90%, they said, have transmitted successfully. But the problem is with the packet, I am not an IT guy, but there's a problem where
The packet, it's a little information.
Yes.
Chunks.
So they're saying that the votes were actually transmitted. It was received
Okay.
by the server, but it cannot be downloaded by the media companies for it to be processed into like a human readable data, for example, like for the purpose of the quick count. So that was the explanation of the COMELEC. But for me, the problem was the explanation came like many hours after.
Why wasn't it in the
Yeah.
first hour, right?
Yeah,
You figure that.
for a certain time, the public was basically clueless on what's happening.
Right.
Like people was asking, why did it stop at 0.4%?
Right.
And what's happening?
And also, I think the thing that didn't make sense to me is that the first 300 plus precincts,
Yeah.
the 15
Yes.
precinct clusters, actually came through and was processed.
Yes.
So that meant that the code was there.
Yeah. I have no idea what happened, but at the end of the day, this thing should not happen. I mean, they have prepared for this for a long time, and this system that they've adopted back down at the moment where it is needed.
Exactly.
So I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we need an explanation from COMELEC on what happened, because again, while we admit that the transmission in the transparency server is unofficial, well, probably I need to explain it to everyone.
Go ahead.
That at the precinct level after the voting, so the machine would do a transmission. So it makes 3 transmissions. Number 1, it goes to the board of canvassers.
Right.
That is the only one which is official.
Right.
It is the data that becomes the source of the official proclamation.
The count.
The
Right.
count.
Yeah, the official count. Right.
And then the second one goes to the COMELEC server.
Right.
And then the COMELEC server is the source of the results being published by COMELEC's website.
Okay.
And the third one is the transparency or the KBP server, where all the KBP, the media entities, the political parties, the access that data coming from the transparency server. So we have these 3 recipients of the data, and the 2 are unofficial.
Right.
And then the one that goes through the ladderized transmission, we call it. So from the municipal or city board of canvassers, it goes up to the provincial, it goes up to the national, and it becomes the basis for the proclamation.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So you were there at the time. Why would the COMELEC server and the transparency server not just be one?
Well, I think they're looking at it's for the internal use of COMELEC. On the other hand, KBP server is meant for like third party, like the media, the political parties, and other entities who want to access it. It was granted by
Watchdogs.
COMELEC. Yeah, watchdogs,
Yes, yes.
PPCRV, NUMFREL, for example, had they
Okay.
been granted authorization.
Right, right. Actually, they were right, but they didn't.
But
they
they-
decided
yeah,
not to
yes,
do it.
exactly.
Lente was there.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess how would you rate COMELEC's performance so far? It's still a bit early. We don't have.
Yes, I
proclamations yet.
mean, but the thing is, for example, we received report, for example, that a lot of contingency PICOs, a lot of malfunctioning PICOs were not, and malfunctioning SD cards were not immediately replaced, because under the rules of
Yeah.
the COMELEC, before you would allow a PCOS machine to be replaced or an SD cards to be replaced, you need an authorization coming from the National Technical Support Center. It's like
Right.
a call center in Manila.
Right.
So everyone in the Philippines, if you have a problem, you have to call Manila and ask for an authorization.
Right.
So at that time where there were a lot of problems in the field, a lot of VCMs have been malfunctioning, they were trying to call the NTSC and actually the call center back down.
Oh my God.
So they were saying that we've been calling for hours and nothing's happening.
Right.
And then I think I have heard, not officially, but I've heard that eventually the Commission and Bank decided to devolve the function to at the level of the regional director of the COMELEC
Right.
to actually do the authorization in behalf of the National Support Center.
Is this different from before?
No, actually
This has always been the workflow.
No. This is the first time that it was been done because supposedly the NTSC should function.
Right.
In fact, if you read the rules of the COMELEC, there's no such thing as calling the regional director, for example.
Okay.
But it was implemented. I've heard last
no, I
election.
mean having everything go back to NTSC. That is the process. from the
Yes,
beginning.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And-
Because of course there's a danger as well. There's a risk if the local COMELEC official would just be allowed to
Make the
move
call.
machines and replace machines and replace
Understood,
SD cards.
understood. Oh.
So it needs like a high security clearance for it to be done.
So the reason why the NTSC bogged down was because there were too many requests,
I
something like that.
like probably it's one of the reasons.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. So again, given that, right? So there were very many high-profile fails on voting
Yes,
day.
yes.
Former
Yes,
Vice
yes.
President Jejomar Binay,
Yes.
Grace Poe,
Yes.
the Binays.
Yes, exactly. But the thing I think with Vice President Binay is something else. It was a case of a
It was-
rejected ballot.
Right.
There's no problem with the machine. What I find problematic is actually of how COMELEC treated the problem.
Yes.
Yes, because in the first place, of course I respect him as a former vice president, but at the end of the day, he's just any other voter.
Right.
So he should be treated as any other voter. So under the rules, if your ballot is rejected, then all you have to do, the teacher will actually put that in an envelope for rejected ballot and tell the voter, I'm sorry, your ballot has been rejected, and that's it. And then you go home. That's the procedure. But you don't get to see high-profile COMELEC officials, and then they will bring you there and change the machine for you to personally feed it. For me, it's actually it's a breach of protocol in the part of the COMELEC. And the thing is, also the principle under the law is that the electoral board, the moment they function, they become independent. They
Yes.
become an independent republic. COMELEC cannot even replace your judgment in that case. So for me, it was a case of a breach of protocol on the part of COMELEC in doing that, in accommodating the former vice president.
Who will hold COMELEC accountable?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's an internal grievance procedure or procedure when you can hold COMELEC employees accountable. And also, when we talk about, of course, the COMELEC commissioner and chairman, they can only be removed by the process of impeachment. Yes.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so overall, how would you rate our performance in, this would be the fourth automated election?
Well, most people have been saying that this is the fourth time, for example, that we've been doing this.
Yes.
For example, the issue of unbundling or getting AES components from different suppliers has already been a problem during our time in 2013.
Yes.
Just to
yes.
give you a background, in 2010 it was bundled.
Yes.
During our time, we got a lot of pressure coming from the GPPB, from the DBM. They're saying that you have to unbundle it. Why?
Unbundled, yeah, exactly. Why? Because too much control for Smartmatic?
Well, because
or?
there was a criticism then that it's actually Smartmatic is running the election.
Correct, and
then,
it's a foreign group.
Yeah, and then second is the moment you bundle all of these contracts, you ended up with a very high ABC or the approved budget for the contract. For example,
Right.
it's 10 billion. I mean,
Right.
who can spend 10 billion?
Right.
So the principle was you unbundle this to a smaller contract so that local companies can compete.
Okay,
But the problem is we have the compatibility issue in the end.
correct.
Oh, just to give you an example, in 2013 elections, there was a mismatch between the ballot paper and then the ink.
I remember this too.
Yes, it's a big
Yes,
issue.
Yes.
So the moment you sheet the ballot, instead of the ballot absorbing the ink, you end up with a pool of wet ink on top of the ballot. So the moment you feed it in the machine, you end up smudging the lens of,
Yeah.
the PICOS machine.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was already a lesson way back in 2013 that there has to be, that all of these components should come from a single supplier, because you don't want to have these different suppliers blaming each other.
Yes.
And you end up, none of them is held accountable.
Yes.
And for me, that's problematic.
Why are these lessons not cascaded from every COMELEC that handles different elections?
I wish I can answer you with that. I guess I don't know. I mean, I don't know the reason why, despite these learnings in the past elections, that they've still done it. I don't know.
I mean, every 3 years is not that far away from
Yes,
each other,
exactly.
right?
In fact, every preparation, for example, the preparation for the 2019 election started immediately
The
after
day
the 2016
Yeah,
elections.
yeah, I remember
So
this as well.
it's a long process. It's a long preparation.
Okay, so I mean, we're still looking at the partial and unofficial counts.
Yes.
Guys, come with me first on our live blog because if you're interested in the developments as they happen
Yes.
here. How interesting you're saying this. We just posted this now at 4:25, 2 minutes ago.
Yes.
The COMELEC to probe suppliers of defective materials.
Yes.
So that just crossed 2 minutes ago.
Yes.
Vilma Santos leads the NP in the Batangas Congress race. Robredo saying Ocho Derechos fight continues.
Of course.
And then the senatorial race as of 3:13 p.m. It's more than an hour ago. We can stop here, and why don't I go to the actual senatorial race if you want to look at the real-time by the transparency server results. It is ph.rappler.com, and we can go here. You can take a look. Hopefully it'll pop in. I've just reloaded it. But this hasn't changed all that much. Cynthia
Yes.
Villar in first place. And here we go. At 24.5 million for Cynthia Villar. She's number 1. Number 2 is Grace Poe. Number 3, Bongo. Number 4, Pia Cayetano. 5, Bato de la Rosa. 6, Edgardo Angara. Lito Lapid is 7. Aimee Marcos is 8. Francis Tolentino is 9. Bong Revilla is number 10. 11, Coco Pimentel. And 12, Nancy Binay. It's
interesting
still
list.
partial and unofficial because, it's drilled into me. You have to keep saying that until
Yes.
the actual official results are in. But
Yes.
this is with almost 95%
Yes.
of the precincts reporting. Do these results surprise you?
I'm surprised actually that none of the opposition candidates have made it even at the bottom of the top 12. It was especially, for example, Marojas. Marojas is a very popular senatorial candidate. He would always very high ranking in the senatorial race, but all of a sudden now he's even out of the magic 12. So very interesting.
What does this show you about where Filipinos are today?
No, a lot of people have been saying that this is all about Duterte magic, but to a certain extent, you have to put more nuance to it. For example, this is actually for me seeing that so much money has been poured by this government.
Right.
And then also the fact that a lot of people have been donating so much money with these candidates. So you were able to launch a very strong national campaign. You were able to afford a lot of commercials on TV.
Yep.
So this is very crucial in a national campaign. And apart from that, we should also consider the fact that they have used government machinery in launching their campaign.
That's
And for
also
example, they have transformed the local bureaucracy into their personal campaign team. So apart from this Duterte magic, you have to see this actual components of the campaign plan of the administration to appreciate the money, the effort, the influence.
Doesn't every administration do that?
Of course, everyone is doing it.
Yeah.
I think even during the time of Aquino, they have done it as well.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, very interesting for me, you mentioned Mar Rojas. What role do you think social media played in all of this?
Well, one proof, for example, is Chel Jokno.
Okay.
Chel Jokno is the most popular of all the senatorial candidates. I think he's the most popular one online.
Okay.
both online. But if you look at the final results of the voting, it did not really translate into actual votes. So also one you could also notice, for example, that among the university surveys,
Yes.
in almost all schools in the Philippines except Davao, he actually topped it. So, but the thing is, it also did not translate into actual votes. So, probably it's a realization that as much as social media influences what goes out on TV and radio, but at the end of the day, its reach is still a bit limited.
I'm going to throw something that
Yeah.
our research team has
Yes.
noticed that you might find
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
You just mentioned Chel Jokno. You know,
Yes.
here's another highlight from our live updates. If you take a look, hashtag Salamat Chel
Yes,
trends for
yeah.
Twitter's woke lolo. Woke lolo. What I was going to show you is this one. This is the combined top 6 candidate pages for March 2019. And what's very interesting here is if you look at Mar Rojas, here are his, you know, he's actually got, actually let me show it to you here. So Mar Rojas's campaign pages are here, right? What's interesting are Bongo's
Oh, wow.
own pages, right? In fact, Bongo had the most number of Facebook and affiliate accounts, we
Okay.
started calling them. But what was interesting is Bongo, so we track disinformation on
Okay.
Facebook.
Interesting.
Bongo is not connected to the disinformation networks. He was connected to traditional media.
Yes.
The reason I thought this was interesting is here are Mar Rojas's accounts, but look at this little spread of yellow over here.
Okay.
Sorry, so that's Mar, this is Bongo, this is Aimee, right? This is also looks like it's Mar Rojas because it has his name, but you can see that they are not pro Mar Rojas, they're against.
Okay.
These are attack accounts that are more closely affiliated to these, the green and the red, than they are to Mar Rojas's accounts here. What's the impact of the attacks that are exponential on social media? And I ask this because we noticed around April 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, URLs, websites that would have anti-Mar Rojas. And,
Yes.
and the topic was Mama Sapano,
Yes.
that he was
Yeah.
guilty
Yeah.
of Mama Sapano.
It was
And-
also coupled by a lot of campaign speeches of the president focused on Mar Rojas.
Of course.
It was they went
That's always
side by side.
that is actually always the tactic.
That's the
Like,
tactic.
it'll be bottom up
Yeah.
through social media and then top down from government,
Yes.
right? And if it's the president himself, this
Yes.
is very potent. Whoever the target
Yes.
is gets crushed.
Yes.
We know.
Yes.
We've been a target.
Yeah, because if you look at it, for example, those speeches by the president will be covered by traditional media,
Yes.
by TV and radio.
Yes. But, well, what we've learned is that, you know, President Duterte repeats over
Yes.
and over and over. So traditional media doesn't tend to pick everything
Yeah,
up. But
true.
in this particular attack, and it was a concerted campaign to
Yes.
attack him, beginning April 16th to the 19th, it was very specific. It was Mama Sapano.
Yeah.
The response was tepid at best
Yes.
from the camp. So
Yes.
really, it seemed like the campaign wasn't prepared to take on this kind of attack, but
Of
the
attack.
attack was concerted,
Oh yeah.
top down, bottom up.
Yes.
What's the role of social media in this, given
Well,
that?
probably it number one, it shapes social media users' opinion on Mar Rojas. It's the most like at a superficial level, but we all know that it also probably affects not just Mar Rojas but the whole of Ocho Derecho. That's one of the observations that I can give.
So let me, I think this was a type of campaign that came of age after President Duterte came into
Yes,
office. You know,
yes.
what we saw in 2016 is that social media helped President
of course.
Duterte win. But the weaponization of social media began in July of 2017, which is when the drug war began. It
Yes.
was after President Duterte took office.
Yes.
Right? And then now what we saw, and I guess I can show
By
you.
2019, perhaps they perfected the craft.
Actually, the attack is perfected.
Yes.
And I can show you some of that again because it isn't only happening in the Philippines, it's happening globally.
Yes.
in the United States, for example, the Mueller report showed
Yes.
the connections
Okay.
of the attacks during the election period
Yeah.
in the United States, but the relationship to Russian disinformation networks, right?
Yes.
What we found in the Philippines is that our information ecosystem is linked to the Russian disinformation, and we
Interesting.
found that link. I can tweet it. I can tweet it to you later. You know, obviously, I get very. This is obsessive because it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Very interesting. Because I mean,
I don't think the candidates take seriously
social media.
not just the positives of it, but more the negatives of it. 'Cause-
Yes.
And this is what we've seen globally. We call it patriotic trolling. In the Philippines, it is online, state-sponsored hate
Yeah.
to attack and silence
Yes.
not just journalists, perceived critics, opposition politicians, anyone who questions the drug war.
Yes.
This is where we've seen it deployed.
And apart from that as well, I think it must be coupled as well by the fact that most Filipinos actually are poor internet users. Everyone tends to believe that whatever comes out of Facebook, you would believe is as true.
That's
I mean, so they are the perfect bait. I mean, they're the perfect couple. You have this
Yes.
information and you have like gullible audience, then you end up with a disaster.
Yes.
You end up with Philippines 2019.
Well, so I will go back to the results again, and
Yeah.
you know, one of the first things you said is that Mar Rojas, he was a candidate for president.
Yeah,
right?
really popular senator.
And now he's not making it in, at least from the partial unofficial results.
As in, I'm quite surprised with even Bam Aquino. I mean, of all Ocho Derecho, they too actually both have the two highest chances of winning. Why? Because they have the money,
Yes.
unlike the rest.
Correct.
Yet, despite of the commercials, despite of the well-financed campaign, they end up still like outside of the Magic 12. So it came as a surprise to me.
Can I ask you why, from the Liberal Party perspective, why was the campaign not more consolidated?
Well, I can't speak for the Liberal Party.
Yes.
I'm not lawyering for the whole
Or maybe
ticket.
from the insider of things, of
Yes,
what you
yes.
can understood. You
I
can't
think
speak for
one
the Liberal
reason is that, number one, I think I observed that it seems that, for example, observing the campaign of Mar Rojas, for example, there was a deliberate effort for him to separate himself from the so-called Dilawan, a deliberate effort for him, for example, to distance himself from the rest of the Ocho Derecho.
Yes.
They call it strategy, but for me, it was not strategy at all. It seems deliberate on the part of Rojas, and
it weakened him. Well, at least in retrospect, right?
yes, because a lot of people who actually believe in the so-called Dilawan have started distancing themselves from Rojas as well, because you were not there with us. You separated yourself from us.
Right.
So, well, other factors that we can see as well is that there's not much money
Right.
coming in for the whole team.
Right. Right.
So, for example, if you look at TV commercials,
Right.
very few of them have TV commercials. Only
Yes.
Mar Rojas,
Yes.
Bam Aquino, Chel Jokno have very few commercials, and
Right.
the rest have none.
Yes. Yes. Well, the other thing also is it seems like the opposition itself was divided, right? That there wasn't a united opposition. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know if that would be like the most accurate of being divided, but probably it could also be attributed for the opposition not being as strong as it should be, not being as vocal as it should be.
Yes.
In other words, failing the expectation of the people who believe in them.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I think part of it is again like looking back over the campaign.
Yes.
We had an opposition that wasn't ready to embrace being an opposition, and
Yes.
you know.
And also, I think the fact as well that they recognize that the president is still very popular. So most of them, from the strategic perspective, is that you wouldn't go against the train, or you'll be crushed. So I'd rather sidestep and stay alive.
Is that smart given the performance now of both Mar Rojas
Well,
and Bam
I
Aquino?
mean, looking at the numbers, looking at the votes so far,
Right.
I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
best
Sorry, you're
strategy.
speaking for them, Emil. These are really my questions, and I will find them and ask them directly, diba? But you know,
No, it's just my observation, my personal observation. I mean, I
Correct.
cannot speak for the whole team.
well, so let me ask you, what could the opposition have done better?
Well, some people have been saying that the campaign was shaped in such a way that everyone was designed to attack directly the opposition, and some people have been saying that they should have instead engaged, they could have embraced that engaging attitude of not really going against the president, but rather, oh, we are opposition, but we are willing to work with the president. I mean, a lot of people that I have talked to have been suggesting that. I don't know if it's a good strategy as well. But of course, I mean, now, I mean, we can talk
Right,
for eternity
right.
about what could have been done, the shoulda, woulda, coulda, but
Right.
but
Right.
I
I
know.
mean, really interesting, right? Because for the first time since, I guess I was talking to Leon Buon, our justice reporter, earlier today, and I
Yeah.
was saying, you know, when was the last time that the opposition failed to make it into the Senate?
that even one, no?
Not one.
Not
well,
even
you
one.
you have some existing there, right?
Like
But
independent, quote unquote.
in these elections, yes, but you still have, of course, Laila de Lima.
Oh, yeah,
you
yeah,
have
yeah,
right
yeah, of
in,
course.
in the Senate itself
Yes,
as it
yes,
stands, so it's
yes.
not complete. But in terms of winning the election, yeah, I think our guys actually traced it back to 1938,
They haven't
and
found
there that was the last time when you
Wow.
didn't have an opposition, and the entire
Yes.
governance and systems, and the leader then, I mean, the president was
Yes.
Quezon, so it was a whole. It
Yes.
is really apples to
Yes.
oranges, right?
Yes.
But it's historic.
Yes.
I mean, and that means that not only did the administration candidates do a good job, I mean, if you think about it, President Duterte backed two different parties, Hugbong
It was
and
strategic.
which I think President Aquino kind of tried to do with Grace and Mar, but it
Yeah.
didn't work.
Yeah.
Right? In this one, he did this. It also looked like, I can show you some data where, you know, normally in midterm elections, politicians will go to the ruling party, whoever that is.
Yes.
But this time around was almost, you know, like truly, not only did it show you how weak our party system
That
is,
is true.
it really almost imploded.
Yeah.
So, if you were the opposition, you know them, what should they have, or is it too soon to ask this now?
Yes.
What should have happened?
I think, I mean, instead of
I asked these questions from Barry Gutierrez last night. Also,
and what did
by
he
the
say?
way. He admitted that they should have.
Done something else.
It was almost like there was no emergency call.
Okay.
It was like it seemed like the rivalries, or you know, there wasn't a call to arms, and the administration definitely made it a call to arms, right?
Oh yeah.
So in that way, we can say they were organized, and they were, yes, they had money, but they were very focused on what exactly they wanted to do. So it was an interesting chat. Yeah. So opposition. Vice President Lenny Robredo,
Okay.
you do, you know, how she's saying that Ocho Derecho will not give up the fight. What's been her reaction? How has she done during the campaign and now?
Well, I mean, I've been watching her as well from the sidelines. I'm not directly involved with the campaign of Ocho Derecho as a team.
Yes.
But I can see that she's been like personally going to all these sorties all over the country.
She was, yes.
She was, but the thing is, I mean, at the end of the day, she's selling a product to the people, and your sales speech can only be as good as your product. So it all boils down to the candidate that you're offering to the public. I mean,
Yes.
are they good enough? So, but for me, I mean, they are the best candidates there. But again, is there enough marketing? Did Ocho Derecho like launch a marketing that these candidates deserve? So a lot of questions, a lot of considerations.
I'm throwing an idea out, which is, you know, part of President Duterte's people have been calling it magic, and hopefully we'll be joined by Pia Renada, who's
Yeah.
been following him from forever. Well, since he was campaigning for president, right? But yeah, this magic is partly because he is so authentic in his words, right?
Yes.
And one of the questions I had with Ocho Derecho, actually the candidates threw their heart into it. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
see
You
it,
can see
right?
it, yeah.
But they didn't have enough of a launch pad,
Yes.
you know, by the political party. And the ones who did have the kind of established basis, you know, and I would throw Grace Poe is an independent, but Grace Poe, Mar Rojas, the folks who were, we'll call them progressives in different ways, right? They didn't have that kind of nudge. So in a way, while they threw their heart into it and did their best, along with the vice president, no one actually united. And the authenticity, I mean, it's very strange for someone like an observer, a journalist
Yeah.
like me, to see Bam Aquino
Yeah.
move away from
Yes.
his family color.
Yeah.
His last name is Aquino.
Yes, exactly.
And yellow is yellow.
It's yellow. It's yellow. Yeah. No, but the thing is, I think one of the strategies is to offer a counter narrative that is exactly opposite of the president. Like, for example, they call everyone portrayed the president as bastos, uncouth, but then they would portray themselves as decente and the proper ones. So they offer this counter narrative, which I don't know if we can judge it by now to say that counter narrative has ended up ineffective, but it's a strategy that probably might be worth reconsidering, like in the coming months or in the coming years, going towards 2022.
You know, let me take you back on my computer and show you. We in Rappler believe social media played a far larger role than
we appreciate.
Than the politicians. I think that the administration understands
Yes.
this, because we've been talking about how the attacks have happened, and the attacks are real. And so take a look at this. This is combined pages of January 2019. And again, the red is Marcos, blue is De La Rosa, green is Bongo, yellow is Rojas. If it's light gray, that is a Facebook page. A darker gray is a Facebook user. So we make a distinction between a page and a user, and black is a website. What I find interesting about this is that, again, Bongo's accounts are more connected to traditional media,
Okay.
right? Which kind of showed you that he actually worked with, and that could be, you know, the political ads, or, you know, he really moved in there. And one of the things I can show you here is state-run PNA. You talked about the government resources. This is data that proves that's the case. This is written by Pia Renada and Don Kevin Hapal. State-run PNA leads the pack in publishing online PR about Bongo. Let me show you some of the data they unearthed. This one you have to look at on your mobile phone, because it's very hard on my screen, but you can actually see clustered topics, and maybe Pia can take us through this in a little while. But look at the topic clusters. These are articles mentioning Bongo, and this is how much PNA of those articles, how much is done by PNA, and the topic clusters. Top publishers of Bongo PR articles: the Philippine News Agency, the Daily Tribune, Concept, News Central. Of the traditional media, Manila Bulletin was number 1. PhilStar is followed, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. PhilStar 6, PIA 7, Thai News Service. That's interesting. 8, Manila Times, and we go down. And then if you take a look at the PR news, they're here. So this is interesting to me, right? The coverage of Bongo, and you can almost see exactly when they triggered, when the PR articles began here by the dates, right? And Pia Renada is joining us, and she's nodding her head, and I'm going to give her a chance to take us through this. But I want to finish what I was showing you with this. Bongo worked more with traditional media establishments. The accounts that were more connected to the disinformation networks were actually Bato, De La Rosa, and the Marcos, Jaime Marcos's accounts. And the reason why is because on the Marcos accounts, and you can look at how many they are, the Marcos accounts, it wasn't just Jaime Marcos's social media accounts, it was also Bongbong Marcos's. So that's had a longer gestation period. But what we observed is historical revisionism.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So interesting, the three of them, they had different strategies. Bongo had nothing to hide.
Yeah.
He had everything to build, so he went traditional media.
Yes.
De La Rosa, the only thing, he's a charming personality. He capitalized on his charm, but he was also leading the drug war.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And you can't actually move away from that. So he was slightly connected to the disinformation networks. Some of these accounts have been taken down by Facebook, right? So these are, you can see that. And then when you look at the Marcos accounts, again, very interesting. This involved, Amy Marcos had to deal with, Rappler has done the stories on her education, Princeton, not Princeton. Did she finish law school? All of these questions, and we answered them. But there's a way that you cannot answer them if you're the person. Amy actually did a good job of keeping it in the air, right?
Yeah.
So I submit to you this chart and the data. The circles are large. The size of the circles are connected to their influence, and what this shows you is the impact of social media.
Yes.
Right.
And one thing is clear, for example, that these people have heavily invested in social media to launch their campaign. But one thing that I predict this, come June 30, you can never see this declared in their sauce. I'm pretty sure of it.
It's so interesting because even in terms of campaign spending,
yes,
Bongo began spending in traditional media much earlier. So it's not.
It's actually a way of circumventing the rules.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And joining us now is Pia Ranada, who has just returned from Davao.
Yes,
Pia,
from the airport.
From the airport. So I was showing your piece on the coverage of Bongo. When you went through this data, can you tell us, what did you learn and what did you mean to show in this data piece? Because
the first signal that I got for trying to do this piece, or the first clue that a piece like this had to be written, was just the fact that reading P&A articles, going to their homepage, you would see just a tremendous amount of Bongo news. And sometimes I read them and is this really news? Because it doesn't sound that interesting, or it really does sound like PR. And sure enough, when I copy paste the article and put it into my email, and I find that there's an email of the PR, and it's not changed at all. It's word for word, and so it's okay, this might be a story. So I asked our team to help with the data, and sure enough, it showed that the PNAs has really been very prolific in publishing such news. And I also noticed when I cover the campaign trail, Bongo is always trailed by state-run media reporters.
Yes.
And these reporters are embedded in his campaign, not in the way that mainstream media reporters are. Yeah. So we have to go the extra mile to find out where he is. For example, I'm not in the Viber group where they send advisories about his events, but for some reason these PNA state-run Radyo ng Bayan reporters always know where he is. They're always ready with a question. He always answers their question, and when it's time for mainstream media to ask a question, suddenly, okay, no more ambush interview. So
it's a way to control the media
staged.
because he staged. That's the right word, right? Did you ever ask him about it?
Yes. Well, I asked him things like his promise to be a bridge. How is that really going to be a concrete promise? What's the concrete outcome of that? I asked him about government resources being used in his campaign, and in the rare times that I'm able to participate in those ambush interviews, he usually gives a non-answer or something like a challenge, very Duterte-like. Like he would say, if someone can prove that I used government resources, don't vote for me. So that's very Duterte,
if
right?
someone can prove that I didn't use, you just proved he did use government resources,
but he won't.
So it was a challenge to you.
Yeah. No. And he doesn't really answer the question directly. He will answer it through a challenge.
Yes.
So you don't really get answers. You don't get clarity on what the real deal is with his campaign spending.
But it's very interesting from the election perspective, because number one, when he filed his COC way back in October, He's deemed resigned because he's an appointed official.
Right.
And for all legal intents and purposes, I mean, the PNA should have no business covering him. Because
interesting.
PNA has no business covering a private person, right?
But the PNA can cover anything, can't
No,
it?
but the thing is...
No, I understand.
Yes.
I'm just being devil's
Oh,
advocate, right?
But then, of course, we all know the context.
Right.
And apart from that, it's the fact that he is a candidate.
Right.
And there is a rule actually in the Omnibus Election Code where any government resources cannot be used to promote a candidacy of any person. It's actually an election offense. So, for example, if you can prove that PNA, for example, it's a state-run media, I mean, adapting a policy where a candidate is being promoted, his candidacy is being promoted, then that would actually fall within the prohibition of the Omnibus Election Code, and people can go to jail for it.
We actually asked PNA for their side, and they're todo denial. They say we only publish PRs which are newsworthy. But then if you check the PRs, for example, of Bam Aquino, who's a senator,
Right.
they're not as much
Right.
on
Right.
PNA. And
The
second,
data doesn't lie.
Exactly, the data doesn't lie. And then we also asked them, so how come you have so much coverage of the Bongo's events? And then they say it's because even if he is no longer SAP, he is apparently the duly appointed representative of the president. So this is
that
like
something
it's not a
completely new?
formal. It's new to me because
Yeah, I know,
there's
exactly.
no formal appointment that he's some sort of representative,
Right,
right? It's just,
right.
I guess he was tapped in a private capacity to
But even
represent
then,
the president. But
right.
then, how can you be private but represent the president? It's strange. It's a strange reasoning, but that's the reason they gave.
But everything is changed with this administration, so what's new?
Bongo is quite powerful even before he became
Oh, yeah.
senator. I'll trace it back. Pia knows this. Rappler did a story on the frigates, the naval ships that looked like it was a form of corruption, and the person who signed for it was Bongo, and he came into the Senate hearing with the cabinet, much of the cabinet in tow, and then a day after the Senate hearing, Pia and I don't go to the palace, but I was thrown in just for the heck of it. You were banned from the palace, correct?
Yes.
And since then, so it's been more than a year.
And 2 months, I think.
A year and 2 months. That ban has extended all the way to every Rappler reporter, not just in the palace, but all around the Philippines. It's interesting, and I tell you that because I want you to see what Pia goes through when she goes to cover an event. Here's, can you pull up this photo? This is Pia in Davao, just over the weekend. And you can see, not only is she doing her work, but we have a policewoman actually looking over her shoulder, right? As
They
she's
were there
doing.
behind me the whole time.
Oh, I have more. Here's a second photo of Pia. The other thing, last night I was talking to Camille, and Camille, who was covering PDP Laban, also has to go through. I like the disguises our reporters are having to do.
You have to be very creative.
So yes, tell me, why are you geared up like you're like this?
Well,
Most
because-
people would like dress. Tell me, Pia, why are you like this?
The hat just makes it harder to see the eyes, which, people usually recognize you when they see your eyes, right? So, and of course it was also hot, and actually at the end of the day, it started to rain. And then actually I found out after this event that they recognized me.
Well, they did,
Yeah, they
obviously,
reckon-
because they're looking at you, like,
So it
so
didn't
this is another one. It also seemed like they were watching you. And here's the last one. Pia's just sitting there. Can you find her in this photo? And look at the folks standing behind her with, who's looking at her right here, right? Fascinating. Pia, tell us, what was going through your mind in this coverage?
I had an idea that maybe they were there for me, but I just didn't. I just thought that maybe they're not doing anything else. They're just standing behind me, and until they pull me out, then that means that they're allowing me to do whatever it is I'm
Which,
doing.
frankly, you should be allowed there
Exactly,
anyway,
because
not
I had
just as a
accreditation.
reporter.
I actually had accreditation
You had
from
accreditation,
H&P.
yeah.
I was in the list. They gave me an ID and everything. I spoke to the media relations person at H&P a few hours before this in the venue. So it was really, really weird that we couldn't get in just because the president was there, was supposed to be there. And my cameraman, Jeff, couldn't get in because they found him early on. So he was asked to step out. So I had to do basically like a two-person team's job by myself. So I had to do the live, well, I couldn't do the live because if they found out Rappler was going live in the event,
Then they would
would have known.
Because one of our Bobby Lagsa was
Kicked out
of
Rally,
an election
a pre-rally event.
Right,
Actually,
right.
he was just
right.
interviewing Cagayan de Oro residents.
This must be hard to do.
It's
I'm not
scary.
talking as-
It makes you anxious because anytime, what could they do to you? They have the full force of the law behind them. They have guns. They have the blessing of the president. So, and what are you? You're just a reporter with a camera and the phone. And if the worst thing happens, that they could not just kick you out, but they could even hurt you and maybe cite a security reason, or dozens of things could happen. Maybe people will fixate on you, like diehard supporters of the president, because they see all of this attention on you. Then it's Pierre Nada. And sure enough, in Davao, when I was going around, people were taking my photos apparently and posting it on Facebook saying, "Oh, Pierre Nada's in Davao." So like, you don't usually have to deal with that kind of anxiety
Correct.
when you do your job as a journalist.
Right, and this is, that's in the real world now, but at the beginning, for both of us, it was in the virtual world. This is why
Yeah.
I go back to
Yeah.
how social media has been
Yes.
weaponized, right? So, I'm just curious before I go to Emil, Pia, why do you keep doing this?
Well, I just want to see the story till the end. I think that's part of it. Like, I was there at the beginning, so it would be such a waste if I wasn't there to see every inch, every bit of the story. And I'm just thinking that with my coverage before, there's a lot I could offer in telling the story because I've been there from the start.
Right,
So I could use that and maybe help people better understand this government.
right. And, what I remembered in 2016, during the campaign, was President Duterte was actually looking out for you then
In a
Mayor
way.
Duterte, right? How would you describe this man?
This man,
As in Duterte. What have
he-
you learned?
I think that the presidency has changed him. And he didn't expect a lot of the challenges that came with it. Because coming from being a mayor for 3 decades in a city that has basically accepted who he is, and he got used to that for so long, then
Right.
he is plunged into this national office where the democracy is is noisier. There are more dissenting voices, and they are speaking in a louder voice.
And there are
there
journalists who will
there are
continue.
institutions.
Yeah,
And there are
journalists who will continue to
Yes.
ask him questions.
who
right?
aren't as chummy as he maybe was used to. So it surprised him. He didn't know how to react, and he reacted in the best way he knew how, which is his instinctual, threatening or pushing back, like exaggerated threats or insults. So, and that just made the problem worse. Now people are criticizing him for that. So, and then plus being a foreign, your job to be the top diplomat of your country,
Right.
he never had any practice
Right.
in that role as a mayor. So that shocked him, and he didn't know how to deal with other leaders criticizing him. He felt that he was being affronted, that somehow for him something even higher, like they're insulting the country, not just him.
The elections are a referendum on his popularity in many ways, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
nearly everyone whose hand he raised has made it
Yeah.
into the Senate.
It seems so far.
So what does this show about where we are today?
Well, it's I don't know. It's a glimpse on actually where we are now. That actually I've made this post that it made me question that am I on the right side or am I on the wrong side? It made you question, like, if everyone thinks that way, if 80% of the country likes him, then am I the one who's wrong
What's wrong with me?
or what's wrong with me? Am I seeing the world differently from them? So it made me ask questions. But then again, I'm also like seeing this day, for example, May 14. This is the first day after the May 13 elections, and this is as well as the first day of campaign for the 2022. And I'm pretty sure that going towards that direction, there will be a lot of changes in terms of alliances, of interests, of movements within the political circles. I'm pretty sure of it. And I think we will see a different scene like in the next 6 months or even in the next year.
Interesting. Pia, how did you react to were you surprised by the results?
I wasn't surprised, and obviously, though the results were maybe more than we thought would be, like the fact that no Ocho made it was surprising, but it was expected, like the basic results, like the basic premise. And at the same time, people are really depressed that none of the Ocho made it, but I think this is also just a reflection that midterm elections will always favor the administration allied bets, and this is just like an exaggerated version of that. Just because the president is also an exaggerated version of a president, because he's not afraid to just go all out. He doesn't have any, like limits. Whereas other
Boundaries.
people would stay within certain boundaries, he just goes past them, and that benefits his allies because then they can expect an excess of presidential support. So I think that things will be very different in 2022. The fact that if he retires, if he makes good on his promise to not seek higher, not run again or extend his term, then people will start to think, is the dynamic flexible enough that we can put someone else out there and challenge the Duterte narrative?
How much of, well, we're very premature because the partial unofficial results, right? But it seems like this backs the survey results. Ronnie Holmes, who is the president of Pulse Asia, actually came on with Marites Vitug earlier, and he said that he thinks, much like you said, the public opinion will bring about an independent Senate. What do you make of that statement?
Well, I find hope that a lot of those who made it are re-electionists, which means that they have an institutional memory of the Senate that is distinct from the Duterte administration. So they will probably have more confidence to take independent stances because they know that they are also banking on factors outside the Duterte presidency. They have maybe their own last names, which are famous and carry some weight. Maybe they can rely on their own work in the Senate, like Grace Poe. She was never really super pro Duterte. Maybe she wasn't as critical as some people wanted her to be, but still, I think she mostly relied on her last name and her track record in the Senate, and she got second place. So I
She
think
wanted
this might.
first, though.
She wanted first, but
She did.
second place is not.
But doesn't want
so
the first
bad.
place, right?
Because in the past, the Senate, if you were first place, it gives you a jump-off point to run for president.
Yes, exactly.
But
That
this-
gave her the confidence to run way back in 2010.
in 20, and it may have been
2016, I
premature,
mean.
right? It may have been premature, but the hard part is this doesn't seem like normal times.
Oh, yeah.
Is it?
Of course.
So what's the difference here? I mean, we were just saying that this is the first time no opposition has made it
Yeah.
into the Senate since the first time since 1960 something, since Ninoy Aquino,
Wow.
right? 1969. I think a few years before martial law was declared. Back to the Future. What do you think this means? So if it's not an independent Senate, we've lost checks and balances.
Oh, yeah.
As the opposition, I also partly blame the opposition, both on social media and on in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, you went through all of the campaigns. How prepared was the administration for the elections?
I think very prepared because even before the campaign period started, you already saw Duterte campaigning, quote unquote, for
Right.
Bongo.
Right.
And even using the frigate Senate hearing as like a platform, a jump-off
Exactly.
point. So, I bet they were already planning it even before the Senate hearing. And I know that they were, and so the the frigate deal was kind of an unexpected development.
Right.
But they decided to use it. And they, in a way, succeeded.
Yeah.
So I think they were very prepared. Bongo is a very meticulous planner. He's very into details. I mean, he has experience in many, not only Davao City elections of Duterte, but also he was the sortie manager of Duterte during his presidential campaign. So a lot of his Bongo
He knew
staff
how to
told me
campaign.
that he's very micromanaging. Like he would really read the PR, the press releases. He would go down to the details, like what are we gonna give to the supporters during the rallies? Like we're gonna give ballers, we're gonna give basketballs because he's into sports development and being a basketball player and fans, something like he thinks is central to his image. So he really goes down to the details, and that's why he doesn't really have technically a campaign manager because
Oh, really?
he is his own campaign
Wow.
manager. He only has aides who coordinate things, but he's really like the one who thinks of everything. Even the skits with Robin Padilla,
And Philip Salvador.
those things are planned.
What kind of senator do you think he'll be?
I think that one thing for sure is he will have hardworking staff who will attend to, all of the back end work. That's for sure. I think that I asked him, can we assume that all the stances you will be taking will be the stance of Duterte? And he said yes. I also asked him, which Senate committees will you be joining? And he said the Senate Committee on Health and on Transportation, and of course the Commission on Appointments, to make sure that
The appointments.
yes.
How interesting. What do you make of first time, a man who 3.5 years ago was the executive assistant of a mayor in Davao?
Well, I'll take it from a very legalistic perspective. I mean, we go back to the roles or the job, basically, of a senator. That is to make law. And here, I mean, he may be like a good planner, he might be a very good planner, but at the end of the day, will he be a good lawmaker? For me, that's the more critical question that should be asked of Bongo.
He has no experience at it. It'll be
No.
really
Oh, yeah.
interesting.
No.
This has always been in
absolutely
the
not.
executive branch.
Right, right. This is just a fascinating time. Let's just check again on the results, just to see if anything else has moved. I mean, it's been moving very slowly now. So for the senator, for the race, wow, I have zipper leather shoes. I must have looked for shoes. Grace Poe, Bongo, Pia Cayetano, Bato de la Rosa. Let's talk about Bato de la Rosa. In the top 5,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
What does this show? First, Emil, and then I want to ask you what he's like.
It's him being there. Actually, it makes everyone questions the fact that the opposition have made human rights as one of the main themes of their campaign.
Right.
And here you are, the guy who's basically the architect of this Oplan Tokhang being catapulted to the Senate. So it makes you question, I mean, where is the country as regards the issue of human rights, of the EJ case, of Tokhang?
Let me ask you that. Where is the country in terms
Oh,
of
in a very bad situation. I mean, I have worked with EJK cases for more than a year. Spent after my time in London up to the time that I opened my own law firm. I spent time like documenting EJK cases, and I know how bad it is. But the thing is,
Sorry, to interject the UN. The UN's own estimate, and this was as of maybe 2 or 3 months ago. Michelle Bachelet actually said that there are at least 27,000 people killed
Yes.
in the
Yes.
drug war since July of
yes,
2016.
yeah. So I think the general public, they have not appreciated how bad this thing is. But in my case, for example, like seeing widows cry before you, like seeing orphans, you suddenly put faces on these numbers. These are not just like 25,000 dead people, but 25,000 families affected by it. So I have a very different perspective. But the problem is, did the general public, did the 62 million electorates actually appreciated this magnitude of the problem and also of the role of Bato de la Rosa in this human rights problem? And then, despite of this, they elected him a senator. So, I mean, I can't imagine, I can't explain how it happened. I mean, it's mind-boggling, to be honest.
It's also interesting, even in the survey ratings, while people were concerned, it was never connected directly
Yes, exactly.
to the people who were behind it. Pia, what did you think of Bato de la Rosa?
I think his best weapon against the drug war controversy is himself, because on the campaign trail, he's really so likable. Like his singing "You Are the Reason," it really titillates the crowd, and you can see a connection really when he talks to supporters, to people in rallies, because the crowd in these rallies, they're not the well-to-do, they're usually the masa, the average Pinoy who they want to connect to the person on stage, and they don't really connect when the candidate is talking about laws they will pass or advocacies they will push. You can see they're blanking out, they're not really clapping as much, but De La Rosa kind of always manages to keep the attention because he shares stories like how he grew up poor in Davao City. There was even a time he shared the story of how he was in a squatter area in Quezon City and they got relocated, and he was talking to Quezon City residents who probably could relate to that experience. So his jokes, they always fly. So people think that how can this guy who seems so nice, how can he be responsible for deaths? And so
25,000 deaths at that.
yes, but like they hear that in the news, maybe they read about it, but when they see De La Rosa, just that amiability, it's hard to counter with. I mean, because they already saw him personally,
Yes.
so
Right.
this is the real deal. Oh, he's really like he's actually not so bad. Like they have that thinking that okay naman pala siya, parang nakakatawa nga siya. He's just like my neighbor. He sounds like my brother. He really sounds like your average Pinoy, like someone you could know and someone you could be friends with. So I think, and we actually saw this because before the campaign season, his survey ratings were not, they were high, but they weren't in the top 5 yet. But come campaign trail, you could just see him slowly going up and up and up. And I think this is because when he hits the campaign trail, he is able to woo people so effectively.
Fascinating. No, I remember when he came in as chief of PNP, and he didn't come in alone. He came in with his mascot,
Yeah.
right? Larger than life, like the bald-headed, and it seemed clear that he had a personality. So, in the top 5, Cynthia Villar, Grace Poe, Bongo, Pia Cayetano, Bato de la Rosa, we went. Sani Angara, very interesting, LDP also, right? Grace Poe, Independent. Lito Lapid, Aimee Marcos. The Marcoses never really left. I mean,
Oh yeah, they never left.
and Aimee seemed to have found the right way to handle all of the lies about her education
By not responding.
by not responding.
I mean, probably they've been denying it since 1987. So she must be really good at it by now.
It'd be interesting to see if that can continue now.
Oh, yeah.
When she becomes a senator, when she becomes a senator. But it looks like she's a shoo-in. The 3 people that President Duterte really campaigned for, Francis Tolentino is the 3rd. So we talked about Bongo, Bato de la Rosa, Francis Tolentino. Why did President Duterte push so hard for Tolentino?
Why? Because first of all, they are longtime friends. So they met because they have a love for big bikes, and they're part of this club that they went through a bike tour around the Philippines. And Duterte always recalls that I would go around with Francis Tolentino, and then even during his presidency, and no, even before that, they were both mayors
Yes.
of 2 cities. So that just made their relationship grow more. And then come his presidency, he became a political advisor, and Duterte turned to him during emergency situations. Like every time there was a disaster, he would appoint Tolentino as the coordinator among the cabinet, like coordinating the relief efforts. So that just whenever Duterte talks about Tolentino, it's always about him being so dependable. He has like a brain on his shoulders. He may be not as personality, not as show busy as De La Rosa, but he's like the worker for Duterte. He's the guy in the back who does the work.
Interesting. Actually, Marites Vitog, who will be bringing back on in after we look at the canvassing again, she was pointing out that this is really taking Davao tactics of campaigning, and obviously President Duterte is good at that because he and/or his family have retained Davao since 1988, right? Taking local tactics to the national level. And I'm going to use that to segue to what you went through in Navotas the other night. And
Yeah.
that was only 2 nights ago.
That's 2 nights ago.
Yeah, feels like a lifetime already.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But, and I guess part of that is, it's vote buying is
Yes,
condoned.
yes.
It's open.
Yes.
Our senior editor, Gigi Go, was saying that it seemed difficult that, people were being called to the basketball court to buy their votes.
Yeah.
It's that blatant.
Yeah.
But tell us what happened in Navotas.
So it was a usual It was a usual day. I mean, I was tasked to actually give last-minute tips to watchers a day before the election, just to give them. I actually just reminded them to just if you see any irregularity or something wrong with the proceedings, you have to make sure that it's written in the minutes of the electoral boards or something like that. So after I gave my very short last-minute tips, I just went inside the room and to rest for a little bit.
You were working on which campaign?
For a congressional candidate in Abotas. Yeah.
Okay.
Just running against an administration candidate. So I was there, and then everyone, I heard a commotion outside, and I saw like around 10 to 15 NBI agents, like carrying high-powered weapons. And then they started accusing us of, oh, you're doing vote buying, you're doing vote buying. And of course, my instinct as a lawyer was to ask, why are you inside?
Right.
Do you have a search warrant?
Yes.
Do you have a warrant of arrest?
Right.
And then they said, no, we had a poster, and then I said, you gave them, she basically zeroed in to a lady, and then they said that, oh, she gave her money, 200 pesos. And I said, where's the video, where's the proof, something like that. And they showed us nothing, and they just started confiscating all this watcher's list, the watcher's ID, the allowances. And then it was really it was so quick, but at the same time, it was shocking for all of us. Like I've been hearing about these tactics. I've heard about it before, but to experience it like personally is something new to me.
You call it a tactic? Can you explain?
Well, basically, I've heard that this was done not just in Abotas, but it was done in Cavite, and it was the same tactic that was used in the case of Crisologo.
Exactly. So it is using law enforcement
Yes.
to either harass or
Yes.
intimidate.
And apart from that, the mere fact that I've been working on the EJK cases for too long, I recognize the same thing, that this is basically Oplan Tokhang but transposed in the context of elections.
Political.
It's the same tactics, like 10 to 15 law enforcement agencies would storm to a place, and then they would accuse you of something. And that's exactly what they've been doing with Oplan Tokhang for a few years now.
So what happened? I think someone was arrested, brought to the precinct,
Well,
but not charged.
They
right?
termed it as invited.
Okay.
We are inviting you. And then I said, can we bring her to the NBI headquarters in Manila using our own car, because she's just supposed to be invited.
Correct.
She's supposed to go there voluntarily. But of course, they said, no, she has to come with us. And then at that point where they actually felt that I was a bit questioning them at every point, and one of the guys told me, are you obstructing us? Of course, as a lawyer, I recognize the term. That's basically like accusing me of obstructing them, which is actually a criminal offense. So it's like them warning me of stop, otherwise I'll be as well charged for
What about
obstructing.
the other side? I'm protecting my rights.
No, I said, I'm not obstructing you. I'm asserting my human rights, something like that. And then I started hearing everyone was like shouting. There were around 500 people there.
Wow.
Inside the basketball play,
Right.
the basketball court, and everyone was taking photographs and videos. And then after that, we went to the NBI headquarters, and then I started, the chief of the legal started explaining things to me, and I just invoked one thing. I said, it is very clear in the Omnibus Election Code that you cannot do warrantless searches and arrests in relation to election campaign. In fact, the law is very specific.
Correct.
That law enforcement agencies can be imprisoned for it.
Right.
And then when I said that article, they recognized it immediately because I've been practicing election law, and I know
Right.
exactly what things, how to get out of it. It's
Right.
not me getting out of it, but actually,
Hold them accountable.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we invoked it against them, and then I said, okay, sir, I'm going to verify if indeed vote buying was committed by your client. And I said, oh, you should do it. And then after like around 3 hours, they made her sign an affidavit. And then
3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah.
And then we left, and they gave us back all of the stuff that they seized. it was shocking. I mean, I'm not prepared for it. I was there for, like I said, I'm going home like around 3 p.m. I'm going to the gym and sleep early.
Right.
Because in preparation for the next day's election.
So what was the end goal?
Basically, I think the as what happened in Cavite, in Crisologo, as well in Osmeña, in Cebu,
Right.
it's basically like their way of accusing like a candidate running against the administration of something, giving an issue that can potentially be used in a campaign. So it's basically, I in this case, I see that my client, that the end goal is to accuse her of vote buying and to portray her as the evil in this narrative. So that was quite clear. And the same case with Cebu, same case with Cavite, same case with Crisologo. And the one common thing about all of these cases is that all of these candidates lost the elections. And all of them actually were running against administration candidates.
I'm just, let's go to the results page here. This is Navotas City. And these are the results that have come in now. I'm assuming you're talking here?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. So 80,265 versus 30,050. Why would they go if they're already winning and they had the resources on their side? Why bother harassing or intimidating?
No,
somebody?
because in Navotas, I mean, no one has been running against the Tiangcos for many elections.
Got it.
I think for more than 3 elections. And this is the first time that there was actually a huge challenge, a serious challenge against them.
A serious challenge against them. Let's
Yeah.
come here. No. Sorry. No one has been running against them.
Yes.
Okay. So, let's go back and take you through the live blog so that let's just see if anything has changed. Let me pull this through and pop as we pull up. Let's look at the top 15 senatorial candidates. Let's go back to the screen. Yes. Thank you. That was really funny. Marites Bitug is joining us as we're going to look at the results here. This is 95.12% of the precincts reporting. This is as of 5:14 p.m., which was just a short while ago. Let me pull it up here as well so that we can see the whole thing. But as of right now, has it changed? Looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, it hasn't really changed at all. So this is over 95% of the votes. The full scope here of the unofficial results, 24.5 million for Cynthia Villar. Cynthia Villar coming in at number 1 and going through.
And according to the reports, she was used to rank around 11, 10, 11, no? 12.
No, she was always number 2.
2?
Yeah, in between. I'm sorry, let me move this.
Remember
Oh,
Camellia?
let me introduce
Oh, yeah.
back again, Marites
Hi.
Bitug. It's so good to see you. And, we started our coverage with you
Yes,
on
and
Sunday
ended
night.
it. No,
And-
not yet. You're not ending yet. No?
Not yet, but hopefully for me for a little bit. So you helped me drill them. But,
Yeah.
Again, really interesting. Were you surprised by the results?
You know, as a journalist, I expected 0 opposition
I kind of,
candidates.
I was
Yeah.
thinking also because of the attacks on social media.
Yeah.
But a number were surprised. I mean, I think even among the opposition followers. But this is historic, Maria. It's the first.
Tell us why.
First in post-Marcos midterm election history that no opposition made it to the Senate. I have a graph, and I won't show it. It was done. Anyway, it's a midterm scorecard.
Oh, I might have this.
It's in the electoral almanac of Manolo Quezon. The last time this happened was 81 years ago in 1938, but it's difficult to compare. It was a unicameral assembly under President Quezon, who was at the peak of his powers. And we talked about this with Professor Ronnie Holmes earlier. He said it's like comparing apples and oranges, so he's not too keen about.
Actually, let me pull it up. Guys, can you pull up my screen? I think this is what
yes,
you're talking through.
correct. You have
yeah,
it.
go ahead.
So
Midterm scorecard elections.
1938
Okay.
was the last time. But it was a unicameral assembly, and
Yep.
Quezon at the time was really very, very popular. But at least the common denominator with 2019 is the popularity of Duterte. No?
Oh my Lord. But this is like a whole other system of government,
Yes,
right?
unicameral
Yeah.
assembly. So, as I was saying, Ronnie Holmes wasn't too keen on comparing it. So, post Marcos, it's really a first.
So take us through here. 1938,
Nine-
there was zero opposition.
1947, well, one, but that happened again under Magsaysay, who was also very popular.
Right.
Now, it happened again under Marcos, the first 67.
And that one LP was
I think
Ninoy Aquino, right?
So remember, there was Rappler did a story on this. There was a comparison to 2019 and 1967 because BAM was already, I think, making it number 12 or 13.
Oh,
so that was.
interesting.
But anyway, now it's bad for our democracy.
Why?
Well, Senate should provide check and balance. But for those who have watched, or those who are jaded and have watched our Senate, they say they still expect some independence because a number of the candidates are eyeing to run in 2022, and they either will support or not support Duterte, depending on the issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that your experience?
Oh yeah. We would always say what they feel that the public wants to hear. So that has always been a case. My observation so far.
So, I mean, you still expect the Senate to have some semblance of independence because that's a question in everybody's minds.
To be honest, I don't know at this point. I mean, most of the people here, for example, there are people who, as you said earlier, that have the tendency to play safe as regards their views. Grace Poe, for example, Nancy Binay, they're a bit vague.
Nancy Villar is. I combined the two dynasties. Okay, sorry.
Dynasties. Wait, is there any chance that Bam Aquino will make it?
No, I mean, I don't think so. He's number 14?
He is.
Yeah,
let
number
me-
14, right?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
14.
At
yeah.
13.764.
What percentage are we?
But a very low, like around 100,000.
Yes. 13.764.
I think there's still a possibility.
But Nancy
Really?
Bina is number 12.
Nancy Binay is number
Yeah.
12. Nancy's actually been quite outspoken, you know?
Yeah.
About the Mukausan issue.
Yes.
The federalism jingle.
Federalism jingle. Right. A bunch of different things. JV Ejercito. The fact that Bong Revilla, fresh from the... We actually talked about this earlier and went through with Leon, who had covered that case, and you know, he's back in the Senate where his office actually was found guilty. His office,
Yes,
right? The guy who worked for him was sent to prison, and now we have collectively sent him back to the same
yeah.
place.
But how come we're not sending back Jinggoy?
Well,
Yes,
he's
rather.
not acquitted yet.
Oh, yes, he's not acquitted yet.
So sorry, I
Probably Bong
interrupted.
Revilla is more good looking than Jinggoy.
That also.
And he had a good ad.
I will never forget that that interview, that Rappler interview. Why are you voting for Bong Revilla?
The two women that was in San Fernando, Pampanga.
And they
Shocked
said,
me also. They said they're voting for him because he's handsome
Yes,
and
handsome.
kind.
Correct.
handsome and kind.
But Lito Lapid is not.
I don't know. That I
As a
can't
celebrity. Thanks to ABS-CBN's Ang
Ang
Provinciano.
Provinciano.
Yeah. 3 years, no? Who would have thought that someone who has been away for 3 years and who wasn't remarkable in the Senate anyway, and is now number 7?
So let's go back.
Okay.
What to expect?
In the Senate.
Well, let's talk about Philip. What did we learn from the voters? Let's say our partial unofficial count is validated, and what do we expect, both for the level of our democracy and our elected are newly elected, there are 18,000 plus posts that were elected here.
I think a lot of it will depend on Duterte's popularity ratings in the second half of his term.
Yeah.
So people always say that at that point he starts to go down. Usually presidents, have an end to their honeymoon period. We haven't seen that yet so far, but who knows? Maybe issues like Chinese workers here could bring him down, because that's burgeoning now. It's something you can really hear regular people talk about over dinner, over normal conversation. But at the same time, I don't know about the public affecting the Senate, because I think now that the people have changed their values and they no longer, the things that people used to find controversial are changing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just Duterte or it's something in the air, something in the, the way our society is shaping up. But, like things like people dying in the streets, it's not as controversial anymore. Things like Duterte's rape jokes, people find a way to justify it. So I don't know if we're changing as a society, and that might influence how we pressure Senate with this new Senate.
Emil?
Well, in my case, I'm looking at 2022, and as usual, political dynamics change after the midterms elections, because a lot of interest would start to sprout all over. For example, we can see that there is an ambition on the part of the Marcoses actually to launch a campaign for presidency this coming 2022.
Interesting.
And also, for example, we can see some movements as well from Davao, whoever it is, either Sara or Bongo. But I'm pretty sure.
Wow, you would go Bongo.
There
There
There are
are.
people who
Interesting.
are saying
Remember
he's the chosen one.
Yes, they fed a question. I think Pia, you reported this, that in the one local campaign of Bongo, the Philippine Information Agency fed questions to the reporters about his plans for 2022.
So if you look at this, there are a lot of, we can still see an alliance right now, but I don't see that alliance will last like in the next 6 months or 1 year, because of course if you're planning for 2022, you have to start, you have to start your campaign now.
Right.
In fact, I always say it, that the first day of campaign for 2022 is the day after the election.
Right.
So today is actually the first day of the campaign for the 2022. And people who wants to go against this administration would, of course, you expect them to start discrediting this government, because you cannot fight against a popular government, right? So the only way to fight against this government is to discredit Duterte. And I don't know, as we all know, the presidential election, usually it's shaped by the last 6 months, but we know that a lot of people who are planning to run it in 2022 might probably start building the foundations of their campaign for the next elections.
Marites.
Which means that I agree that people are looking at 2022, which means that federalism may not pass in the Senate, because they're all looking after themselves and their ambitions. Yes. So I don't know if that's why there's a big question mark about whether it will be in the agenda of Duterte after. Will he present this in July to the Senate? Since everyone's looking now at 2022.
Is that good to hear? That's good, right? That our constitution won't be changed? Or this is all speculation on our part, right?
Yes, actually.
Wishful thinking.
which we saw a lot of. That's true. But go ahead and tell me, do you think that, because, the specter of constitutional change at this point in our democracy is a little shocking, because I've seen different forms of government. Under Suharto in Indonesia, they had a parliamentary system, and the parliament was just as much a rubber stamp as as maybe the House of Representatives was to a degree in the Duterte administration. So I don't.
I think it's not a good time for any constitutional amendment, considering that Duterte has a very tight grip on Congress, the judiciary, and potentially the Senate, but it still remains to be seen. So this is not really a good time to change our constitution. It might slide us further into autocracy. So that's my fear.
Can you give me your best and your worst case scenario, given where we are today? Sorry, this is fascinating to me, because this is historic,
Best case
right?
scenario?
Yeah.
Well, that the president ends his term as expected in 2016.
retires.
No, he steps down as expected in July or June 30, 20, I'm sorry, 2022.
2022.
And then, of course, the next 3 years, we hope that there will be more outspoken senators, who will not just necessarily follow Duterte. That's supposed to be a good scenario.
Okay.
And the worst scenario is when they become a rubber stamp of Duterte, as the lower house tends to be,
Right.
compared to the Senate.
Right, right. Best and worst case scenario?
Well, the best case scenario, I think well, I can't say that it's hard to define what's best and what's not.
It's
No, yeah, it made me think. But I think the best scenario is, of course, we end up with a very independent Senate.
yes.
Of course, that while we expect them, that most of the candidates who's winning probably in the next few days, but we hope that we end up with a very independent Senate, that they keep actually the trend in the last 3 years, that they serve as a check to a lot of policies that the government has been pushing. Worst case, of course, they end up as a rubber stamp, and we end up with a new
So
constitution,
very similar, yeah.
elevating the president to the supreme ruler of the Democratic Republic of the Philippines. That's the worst case
Or his
scenario.
daughter.
Emil, you're a lawyer.
Yes.
We've slowly been seeing, I've used the phrase death
Yeah.
of a thousand cuts, the weaponization of the
Yes.
law. How do you went through what you went through in
Yes.
the Botas. How
Yes.
how do Filipino citizens protect their rights when the rule of law is eroding in these death by a thousand cuts?
No, they would always say that when they tend to attack or diminish rule of law, then it's the best opportunity to fight for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
for example, in the case of EJ case, for example, there were a lot of lawyers who filed cases at the Supreme Court. In other words, to counter the weaponization of the law with the invocation of the law at the same time.
Meaning file cases.
File cases as well.
Even if the judiciary is also politicized.
No, but that's of course you file cases with the hope that you'll succeed. With retaining that little glimpse of faith and hope in the judiciary that that you'll do something about this. For example, in the EJK cases, the decision there was a bit unexpected.
Yep. Yep.
Everyone said that, why are you filing that case? What would you expect from the Supreme Court? But the Supreme Court gave out a very surprising ruling. So, because my perspective on this is that the Supreme Court is a human institution. It's an institution that listens as well to the public opinion. So as much as it wants to please the president, it wants to please the people as well. So I still have that faith in the judiciary, and I still see them as one of the checking mechanism of this government apart from the Senate.
Fingers crossed. Pia, your best and worst case scenarios.
Well, just looking at it in a more long-term perspective,
Yes.
the best scenario is we learn from this administration and we mature as a democracy with the experience. Like, of course, the worst case is if we descend further
Right.
into more of a fake democracy. And
Or we go back to the future. Like go back to, we're sliding back to 1969, so we might, maybe we'll follow 1972. Sorry, go ahead, Pia, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So maybe this is a learning experience for everyone, but also a learning experience for the opposition.
Right.
Like given how they fared in 2019, these
Correct.
elections, what then do they change in their strategy so that they
Yes.
can win the larger battle, which is 2022?
What did the opposition do wrong?
I think they failed to give an all-encompassing narrative, an alternative to the Duterte
Absolutely.
the Duterte promises.
Yes.
And they were individually making their own stances, but what are you here to offer, and how is this current situation wrong? What's wrong with this picture? I think they failed to give a comprehensive answer to that, which allowed the president and his Senate bets to get away with so many things. Because they could say, oh, it's not so bad, now things are actually moving, true change, etc. So without a really comprehensive, hard-hitting alternative, then people are wondering, who are you? What's your identity? And the many moments when they played it safe was a
Yeah.
big loss.
Yes.
Also,
Yes,
Because there's a lot they could have said.
and even just coming together in a more in a crisis way, I suppose, is what I was looking for. Marites, ikaw, how
Yeah,
this is also this loss is a loss by the opposition,
Yes.
right?
In the first, well, they failed to have a united front with other candidates, who are with the opposition.
Right.
For example,
Like the Labor
Neri,
wing, yeah.
Colmenares, or
That's-
Labor.
Right,
If
right.
they could have presented themselves as one full slate, there could have been a chance. Of course, they lack the resources.
Right.
Because there's also the fear factor, which, people didn't want, no, businessmen didn't want to give contributions or lots of donations because of the fear that if Duterte learned about it, the wrath of the president on the business community. So anyway, first is united. They failed to unite themselves.
But is it
Yeah.
is it unrealistic to think they maybe even could have talked to Grace Poe, to Mar Rojas? Is that being unrealistic on my part?
Or maybe they could have
Yeah.
dropped Rojas to be more united. I don't know, because I feel that someone who is not so committed to opposing,
To there, right.
should they be in the opposition? I don't know.
The opposition, we often ask the question, why don't you, attack the administration more? Because according to their surveys or their listening campaign, the people wanted them to tell them what they can offer.
Right.
But how do you balance this with all the attacks of Duterte and the administration?
And the
Balance-
exponential attacks online. This is actually what I
Yes.
was saying.
So attacks on them, and how do you balance that with your story of what you can offer? So it's also it's really very tricky. I think they needed to have a good strategist. But the surprise for me in this opposition campaign is Chel Jokno.
Yes.
I was surprised how he connected so well to the
Yes.
young people. And I think he has a potential for 2022 if he runs for the Senate.
She said it.
Did you say that?
No.
I'm the lawyer.
Really? Okay. No, I was just surprised.
He
I
did
thought,
better than Neri and Gary Alejano, than Juan Ponce Enrile. Samira did. Wow, very interesting. Yeah, the narrative, why should I stick my neck out for you? I suppose is that part. So these are
But
some
there's
of the
also the
things.
fear factor. I mean,
Yeah.
when Duterte released the narco list for the local races,
Right.
that affected already the networks
That's
also
why
of
it's
the
also death by
opposition.
1,000 cuts, because even the thing that was done to you, to Bingbong Crisologo, who is part of the president's political party, but it's law enforcement is much more emboldened.
Yes, exactly.
Can I ask you? Pia mentioned values. Have our values changed? Is this what it's saying? You think so, Maritas?
It's very difficult to answer that, but I think maybe we will revert to who we were after this president leaves. I don't know, we had to do a lot of re-examining, but I was surprised by my niece, who is 15 years old. She was so upset by the election results, and that's why she wrote this little blog. I was really surprised that she said, it's incredibly disappointing, and that she said, why didn't you go out and vote to the adults in her family? And that she thanked candidates like Chel, But a 15-year-old, and she said she really wants to vote and make a difference next time. So I think there's some hope.
The kids are well. The kids are
Our
okay.
successor generation.
We've talked about that, right? The youth vote in the campuses. The campus
Yes.
votes were very different from the statistical
Correct.
surveys.
The mock elections showed.
No, exactly. Actually, if you look at the data of the COMELEC, the huge chunk of voters actually would come from 16 to 35. But the question is, despite of Chel's popularity, for example, on the internet and among the youth voters, did it actually translate to actual votes?
Exactly.
So that's a huge question.
So why? I mean,
How I wish I have the answer. But
yes, maybe
You know,
that.
I actually wound up asking you about Comelec, because he's been inside the Comelec, right?
And
That he was
lawyer for Chell.
exactly, and lawyer for EJK.
Okay, now so you have a big assignment to prepare for 2022.
2022. Interesting.
So you didn't really answer my question if our values changed. I would just wonder, like, well,
I'm thinking about it. Yeah, but why is the drug war accepted by many?
Yes.
At the same time, there's a dissonance in the survey because people say they're scared they may be the next victim. Then another survey says they want the suspects arrested rather than killed. So I find this dissonance. So there's still hope that they want to be safe and they want a more efficient judicial system that will go after these criminals, but
that's where
not to
the
kill
hope is.
them.
Right,
Yes.
right. That's what you're saying. When Pia mentioned that, I thought of these experiments, right? That you move to things like fascism and Nazism, not all in one chunk, and that actually these governments were elected democratically,
Yes,
and
yes,
that it's a slow road towards that. And sorry, it's Glenda's fault, but you know, I went back to look at this book called On Tyranny. It's written by Timothy Snyder. 'Cause again, Glenda's been posting stuff from it. It's very interesting, and we seem to already be moving towards. This is lessons from the 20th century, 20 lessons. Let me just pull this up. It was so interesting because it just showed you all of this gradual movement towards, and these are some of the things they had said, right? Do not obey in advance. So we give up our rights voluntarily. Defend our institutions. Our institutions are pretty shattered. Well, not shattered. They're just controlled now, right? They're loyal. Beware the one-party state. We've just lost opposition there. Take responsibility for the face of the world. We actually say, well, it's their fault because they're drug addicts. Or it's not, I want a safer place. Be wary of paramilitaries, and they actually talked here about, and the next one after that is be reflective if you must be armed, that the groups who carry out these horrific things, the SS, the groups that killed the millions of Jews in Germany, they were actually bureaucracies who kept saying, I'm just doing my job.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's stunning for me because when I was arrested twice, they kept telling me,
The exact same thing.
trabaho lang po ito.
Ah.
Anyway, sorry, it's just, it's,
I wonder how the Duterte Youth Party list is doing.
Is doing.
Because that's a scary development. The right-wing, young, young and very right-wing. So that for me was something to worry about.
your last thoughts as we're going through, shall we start with
The youngest one.
Yeah. Because future.
Should be the last.
Oh yeah, that's true. You first, Pia.
Last thoughts on the elections?
As we're going to take a short break after this because we're going to go back and look at the PICC count, and you might be staying. Can you stay? Well, we'll talk about it. Pia, go ahead.
I think that this elections is a prelude to the last half of the term of the president, and it will be a defining term for not just the president but for the country.
Correct.
Because it will be a transition period, and it will be a time when we decide how do we move on from this. Can we move on from this? Are we at a point of no return, or how will we change after this administration? And a lot of Duterte has control over that. Like, he could affect that. He could decide, how does he want to end his term? What legacy does he want to leave? How does he want to be remembered? And at the same time, the institutions who are part of this government, who make up the government, can then also decide, are we going to allow ourselves to be defined by the executive branch?
Right.
How do we stand up for what our mandate is? Do we be independent, or do we still kind of look to the president's popularity and take our cue from that? And at the same time, the voters too, the Filipinos, like, who will we elect in 2022, and how will, maybe these elections will make more people personally invested in politics because we saw a lot of the youth speaking up, like they were disappointed by the elections. Maybe now it's a wake-up call that we have to be more involved, that we have to take a stand on issues because 2022 is the larger battle and that will really determine where the country is headed.
Interesting. Emil?
After the results were revealed yesterday, I've read a lot of Facebook posts and Twitter posts saying that this is our point of surrender. I'm guessing you've read the same thing, but
I went to 2 arraignments today, so I was focused on other stuff. I'm learning from you guys. Let's go, Emil.
yeah. So what I'm saying is that a lot of people have been saying that this is the point of surrender, but at the same time, this could also be the point where it poses a very huge challenge to a lot of people, not just to the opposition.
Right.
It's the opportunity for us to step back a little bit and think about, are we doing things wrong? Is there like a better way to oppose? Is there a better way to dissent? And in preparation for 2022, we have to be better than what we did in this election. Because a lot of stuff are at stake this coming 2022. It's either we will still be a democracy after that, or it will be like a quick slide to nowhere. I don't know where, but the point is, instead of being sad and disappointed or surrendering at this point, I think we should think of ways that we can be better at what we do rather than surrendering.
I'll take off from Emil's because that's my point. It's really the challenges
Yes.
that lie ahead, not just for the candidates, not just for the politicians, but for us.
Yes.
For a lot, I mean, the
For
young
lawyers, for
for the young
journalists.
people. You mentioned how many millions of
A
the
huge
young
chunk. I can't
2.3.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
2.3 was the new voters that just
and I
registered
think
last
it's
year. But
31%.
Yeah, you-
belong-
30.48,
Yes, belong to
18.85
the-
million
yes.
voters.
So imagine if all of us, we need to be more creative.
Yes.
You know, I mean, what are the new approaches to pushing back? How do we bigger our tent or enlarge our tent? If it's just us talking to each other, how do we reach out to other communities, the business sector, the academics, the educators, you know, because I think this social media sometimes have made bubbles, silos, and maybe we're not reaching out to the larger.
Yeah.
So it's really a huge challenge, and there are so many lessons to learn. And I think in the next weeks and months, we'll all be talking about this. You know, what lessons have we learned?
Yes.
Why did the opposition lose badly? Why did Mar, who was already number 9 in the early survey, slide down?
Yeah.
Why did BAM, who was already going up, you know, not go up further? So a lot of things to analyze and to think about. I think it's a time of reflection for everyone after May 13.
You started the coverage with the 3 points, right?
4.
4, right. Remind
Yes.
us of those 4 points
what
and
did I
tell me
say?
how it's changed. So one had to do with
No, I said that this was the first night, pre-election.
Sunday night.
Yes, I said that democracy is backsliding in the Philippines.
That's correct.
Because this election campaign has weakened the weakest institution, which is the political party.
parties.
Because Duterte did not promote a political party,
Right.
even if he won as PDP Laban.
Yes.
So he pushed for loyal.
Two.
Yeah, he pushed
Yeah.
for people loyalty. It's also the first time that there's the fear factor.
Yes,
Because of the
the climate
narco
of
list.
fear,
Yeah,
right.
in the past
Narco
elections,
list, the
we didn't
media
have.
list.
Yeah, we all had this list, the matrix and
Right,
all that.
right.
I forgot
hate
the rest.
The third was the local tactics have been pushed to national.
Yes. I don't know, this is the first time that Duterte and his daughter Sara, they endorsed rival candidates, no? Which really blurred party lines further and which made a local practice, scaled it up to the national level. So it really disrupted, moment of disruption.
Right.
It disrupted
Right.
our already weak institutions. So I thought it's really a backslide to democracy. And with the results now that we've seen, I think it's really, our democracy is in trouble. But there's hope, as we said earlier.
I always have hope, of course. Wow. Well, it's on many fronts, I think we'll be talking a lot more about why did the opposition lose? Because
Yeah,
part
a
of it
lot
is
of
also the
analysis.
opposition's fault. I hate to, obviously everybody knows that, but you talked about the united opposition. I think the others, globally, social media has
Yeah.
disrupted, and we know as early as 2017, these cheap armies on social media have truly had massive impact on
Yeah.
systems of governance, trust in institutions, weakened many institutions,
Yeah.
including journalists, news groups and journalists, right? Trust is one of our biggest problems globally now. And then the third part was really, I kept wondering when the opposition would act like an opposition, because in many ways it felt like everyone was going their own way and there was no, hey, we're going to lose if we don't do something different. And administration, for better or for worse, President Duterte has always been different. I mean, the different of that he's learned in Davao, right? So it's funny. One of the things he said early on was, "I understand the Filipino. I understand the Filipino." This certainly seems to show that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he has made local national.
that was one of the things you said that I really
Yeah.
enjoyed, because down to the use of the police, right? And it is not just about actually violating any rights, it's the use of fear
Yes.
to just intimidate or harass.
Yes.
A very, very fascinating historic time. Let's go back to the canvassing that is now going on at PICC. These are live videos that you'll see there. Let's run that. Let's go back to that. Okay. And we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I forgot to thank you guys.
For Zambales.
You are authorized to print the same and also project an image to the screen. Secretariat, please show a copy of the printed image to the council and watchers.
Yes, Your Honor.